You buy a government bond, $10,000. Treasury Direct confirms it. The money leaves your account. You now own a piece of American debt, backed by the full faith and credit of the United States government. Except you don't. Not really. What you own is a digital entry in a system most people have never heard of, managed by a private corporation in New York that handles more money every single day than the entire GDP of most countries. And the mechanics of what happens after you click buy reveal something deeply strange about how modern government borrowing actually works. This isn't a conspiracy, it's just how the plumbing functions. And once you see it, you start noticing the gaps between what we're told about government debt and what's actually happening behind the curtain. Let's start with the simple version. When the US government needs money, it issues bonds. These are IOUs. You give them $1,000 today, they promise to pay you back with interest later. Treasury bonds, treasury notes, treasury bills. Different names, same concept. The government borrows, you lend. That transaction feels direct, you and the government, a handshake across the internet. But that's not what happens. When you buy a treasury bond, your order doesn't go straight to the Treasury Department. It goes through a dealer, almost always a bank. JP Morgan, Goldman Sachs, Citigroup. These are called primary dealers, and there are 24 of them. They have an exclusive arrangement with the Federal Reserve. They're the only entities allowed to bid directly at Treasury auctions. So when the government issues new debt, these banks buy it first. Then they sell it to you. You're not buying from the Treasury, you're buying from Goldman Sachs. Already there's a middleman. But it gets weirder. Once you've purchased that bond, it doesn't sit in your brokerage account the way a stock does. Instead, your ownership is recorded in something called the Depository Trust Company, the DTC. This is a private company owned by the banks and brokerages that holds nearly all securities in the United States in electronic form. When you check your account and see your bond listed there, what you're actually looking at is your broker's claim that they have a claim on a bond held by the DTC, which has the actual legal ownership of the bond itself. You are 3 layers removed from the thing you think you bought. The DTC doesn't advertise this. Most investors have never heard of it, but it processes trillions of dollars in transactions every day. It's the invisible backbone of the entire American financial system. And it exists because sometime in the 1960s, Wall Street was drowning in paper. Trades were settled with physical stock certificates delivered by hand, messengers running between buildings. It was chaos. The system nearly collapsed. So the banks created the DTC, a central vault. Now, instead of moving securities, you just update the ledger. The bonds stay put. Ownership is just a database entry. This is efficient. It's also opaque. Because when you own a bond through the DTC, you don't actually own the bond. You own a security entitlement. That's the legal term. It means you have a contractual claim to the economic benefits of owning the bond, interest payments, principal repayment, but you don't have direct legal title to the underlying asset. If that sounds like a subtle distinction, it is, until it isn't. In 2008, when Lehman Brothers collapsed, there was a scramble to figure out who owned what. Securities were pledged as collateral in multiple directions. Clients thought they owned bonds outright, but those same bonds had been rehypothecated, lent out again by the broker to someone else. The DTC system allows this. It's a feature, not a bug. The rationalization is that this creates liquidity. Markets move faster when assets can be borrowed and relent. But it also means that at any given moment, multiple parties might believe they own the same bond. The music plays, everyone's dancing, and as long as no one asks to see the actual bond, the system works fine. Now zoom out. Who actually holds US government debt? The Treasury publishes data on this. As of late 2024, the US has about $36 trillion in outstanding debt. The public holds roughly $27 trillion of that. The rest is intragovernmental, one part of the government owing money to another part, Social Security, trust funds, and so on. Of that $27 trillion held by the public, foreign governments own about $8 trillion. Japan and China are the biggest holders, though China's been selling. Mutual funds, pension funds, insurance companies, they own another big chunk. The Federal Reserve itself owns about $5 trillion, bought during quantitative easing. And then there's the household sector, which includes individual investors, hedge funds, and various entities that are hard to categorize. But even this official breakdown obscures more than it reveals. because ownership in the DTC system is recorded by the broker, not by the client. So when the data says household sector, it really means held by brokerages on behalf of households. The Treasury doesn't know your name. They know Fidelity's name. And this matters because it creates a layer of abstraction between the borrower and the lender. In theory, government debt is supposed to represent a relationship, citizens lending money to their government with the promise of repayment. But in practice, it's a web of intermediaries, each with their own interests, their own leverage, their own risks. And when you try to understand who actually owns the $36 trillion of US government debt, the answer fractures. It's foreign central banks, it's the Fed, it's pension funds, it's insurance companies, it's retirees, it's hedge funds betting on interest rate moves, it's banks using bonds as collateral for other trades. It's all of them, and none of them, because ownership itself has become a flickering abstraction in a system built for speed and scale, not transparency or simplicity. The bond is real. The debt is real. The promise to repay is real. But the question of who actually owns it, that's harder to answer than it should be. And maybe that's the point.